Welcome to the Caption Life Show, and today we have a very special guest. You might know his work from Batman or Swamp Thing, Nocterra, Barnstormers. Scott Snyder joins us, and we talk to him about his love for Elvis. We talk about religion and spirituality. We also talk about his time when he was a cast member at Disney World. Our episode highlight is Shortbox Summary Podcast. They are a comic book podcast that takes titles and movies from the mid-2000s and talks about them. I will put a link to their show in the show notes below. And last thing, do not forget to give us a rating or review on your podcast player of choice. Let us know what you think of the show so that way we know what to keep doing and what you don't want us to keep doing. Let's go ahead and get started. Hi, and welcome to The Caption Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. So, today we have a very special guest on the show, and that is Scott Snyder. He has written comics for both DC and Marvel, including the best-selling series American Vampire, Batman, and Swamp Thing, and is the author of the story collection Voodoo Heart from the Dial Press. He taught writing at Sarah Lawrence College, New York City, and Columbia University. He lives on Long Island with his wife Jeanie and his 3 sons. He is a dedicated and unironic fan of Elvis Presley. Scott, welcome to the Caption Life. How you doing tonight?
I'm good, Sean. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. This was like a long time in the planning. I'm a fan, and I'm thrilled to be invited.
I appreciate that. And this, just like you said, this has been a while because I was messaging you through Comic Watch to see if you could come on the Caption Life to talk about this. And I appreciate your flexibility because I think we started trying to set something up back in March, and then I know we finally got a date down, unfortunately we both realized that our original date to record was Father's Day, and we're like, that's probably not a good time. So yeah, I appreciate you being flexible, and as I mentioned to you earlier before we started recording, I wanted to get you on the show. You're one of my top people that I want on the show for a number of reasons, and one of the things, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I've actually met you twice at 2 different conventions. Once at Memphis Comic Expo was the first time I met you there, and then recently at C2E2. And I gotta say, you are one of the nicest and most humble people in the industry that I've met in my entire life. Like, it was really it was great having a conversation with you. Like, it just seemed like we were just 2 people just talking about whatever, and it was a really great conversation. And I really respect you because of that. And I really just like you as a writer, but also as a person, because I can't tell you just how great of an experience that was, sitting at the table at C2E2. I felt like I could be talking to you for hours on end just because you were very approachable and just very nice and everything. So I can't say enough nice things about you.
Oh, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you for saying that. I remember meeting you at C2E2, and it was a pleasure. So
yeah, I appreciate that. So in your bio it says you're unironically an Elvis Presley fan. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, I am. I got into it when I was at my son's age, when I was about 16, 17. I basically I grew up in New York City, and when I was about 13, 14, my dad, who was in the Air Force and then a resident for medicine, suddenly became a doctor. And it was a doctor in the late 80s, early 90s. All of a sudden, he was making money, and we went from being kind of more working class to, middle class, upper middle class. And I went to a really preppy school all of a sudden, and I was really kind of confused by it. A lot of sort of wealthy New York City kids, and I sort of was like, what can I like that nobody is gonna like? What's the thing that no one here will like? And it was Elvis. Nobody will like Elvis Presley. And this,
right.
And so at first it was this kind of act of, this is gonna be my thing. And then I just genuinely fell in love with it. I listened to the Sun Sessions first, and the Sun Sessions are Elvis's first recordings from when he's a teenager. He's 17. 18, about the age I was. And he's like this kind of pimply, completely broke, like insecure guy who goes into the studio and comes in dressed like, a rock star already, and just melds all these things together and sings like, someone on fire. And it was really inspiring to me. And I love that moment, this kind of strange moment, this lightning in a bottle, not just of him, but of all these singers, from blues singers, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and him and Carl Perkins, all these people making something new and being different and all of that. And so I fell in love with that whole era. And then that was a rabbit hole where I just went down, and, then I loved Elvis in the 50s and the 60s and 70s. There's kind of an Elvis for every stage of your life, where it's like you're feeling down. There's all these kind of movies to pick you up, like Viva Las Vegas. You're feeling, up, and there's all kinds of stuff to celebrate. But it was kind of became my, like, my spirit animal for like a kid with a lot of anxiety, having sort of an idol who essentially had nothing going for him whatsoever, and believed already and dressed like the part of being this great rock star. Gave me a lot of confidence when I was a teenager to believe that I could be a writer. I wanted to be a comic artist and writer at that time, but believe that I could kind of follow those things. And so from that age to now, he's always been sort of my favorite. I have like over there a glass from his house. Like that was, I got it in an auction from some of his stuff. It's like a whiskey tumbler from his house in LA. And I have Elvis tattoos. I have like from when I was
oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
I got like, I don't know if it's like weirdly inappropriate or whatever, but I have like,
nah,
I don't know if you can't see it unless I'm too old for this, but like I have like mature.
Oh yeah, the classic pose. Yeah.
And then on the other side, I have this one I got when I was like crazy young, but I have young. This one I got when I was I don't know, like a teenager, before I probably was allowed to get it, but a young Ed Sullivan show. So
right.
yeah, it's been a constant throughout my life, and I think the fun of it is finding something that makes you believe you can kind of do what you want, and so and believing in yourself that way. So yeah, that's long. I've never done that. I don't mean to like strip on your show, but
I think that's a first for this show. Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm and yeah, so, and my kids have Elvis names too, which is, but
yeah,
my wife put up with it. It's Jack Jack Presley was our first. His middle name is Presley. Our middle one, Emmett, his middle name is Aaron. And then we were like, if we're lucky enough to have a third, which we didn't think we could have, then I get to make the middle name Elvis, whether it's a girl or a boy. And so boy, and so it's Quinn Elvis. His middle name is Elvis, which he tells everybody when he meets Snyder. So
that's awesome.
I love it. I've been to Graceland many times, and I just love that kind of that bravado. It's always fun with metal and all that stuff. That kind of feeling of like, just go for it. Just believe that you already are the rock star that you think you can be, even when you got nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
So, that's a long rabbit hole, or long deep rabbit hole. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk about it and give Elvis recommendations and all that stuff.
So when you're like writing your stories and everything, do you usually listen to Elvis music while you're doing that, or do you usually listen to something else to get?
No, I don't. I don't listen to music when I write generally. I mean, if I do listen to music, it has to be something like that. Like, and again, like I'm a big oldies fan. I'm a big, fan. I love moments, and sort of the same thing with history, with the stuff that I pull for my stories. I love moments of kind of invention, where it feels like something unique is being made because of the cultural clash of all these different things. So I love the whole moment of the 1950s of not just, again, Elvis, but also all the kind of contemporaries of that moment that were blending all these sounds of country and R&B and blues and gospel and all this stuff. And similarly, like, I have the moments like that in the 30s, moments like that in the 70s, moments like that so I can listen to stuff that I've loved, like, Motown or Stax, all that kind of stuff while I'm writing. I generally don't, but like if there's anything I listen to when I'm writing, when I'm doing lettering, I listen to that. Like I'll listen to anything I know really well. When I'm like essentially going over, because the stages, sorry to again down a rabbit hole, but like when I'm writing the script, the first version of it, I don't really listen to anything. And then when the art comes back in, and then I'm kind of doing a second pass and adjusting the script so it fits better with the art and sort of changing it. That's when I'm always like listening to something to try and, get in the groove, listen to stuff that gives me inspiration. So that's the phase where I listen to stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm kind of the same way where when I'm working on stuff at home, unless it's something that's really monotonous or just mind-numbingly dull, I usually don't listen to music because I find it, at least for me, distracting, and that I can't really focus when I have that on the background.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I'm always jealous of every artist I work with is like, I can work while I'm watching, like Forensic Files or whatever they want. Like they can work while anything is on, music, TV, whatever. But
yeah.
Writing wise, I have to be pretty kind of in a hyperbaric chamber for
right.
For the first draft.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's funny is with your love of Elvis, I grew up listening to Elvis as well. I didn't have a love for him the same way you did, but I will say this. In my childhood, I remember two distinct things about Elvis Presley from growing up. One is I grew up in Indianapolis, and I guess his very last concert was at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis.
77, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, Market Square Arena is not around anymore, but I remember they had like a huge plaque because that's where the Indiana Pacers played at the time. They had a huge plaque and like a whole memorabilia saying like this is the last concert I ever played at. The other thing I remembered was I watched some sort of special when I was like 8 or 9 on, I don't know if it was like 60 Minutes or something like that, but they're talking about the life of Elvis and how he died on the toilet or something like that. Like as a kid, that was like a really interesting thing to hear about is like them explaining that. And I went to a Catholic school at the time. And apparently when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, when they say like, does anybody want to pray for anybody? Apparently for like a whole month, I would always pray for Elvis Presley, even though he died like 15 years ago. I must have just felt bad that he died on the toilet for whatever reason. So those are like the two things like that I distinctly remember for Elvis Presley. When it comes to my childhood and what it means to me is I prayed for him constantly, apparently, at school, and Indianapolis, my hometown, was where he had his last concert at.
Well, there you go. I mean, I feel like it's whatever thing makes you believe. It's like tapping into something. I always tell people in my class, I'm like, whatever you can tap into that makes you believe that you can do the thing that, everyone is telling you can't, or the world is telling you can't. And that thing is special to you. And there's sincerity in that, whatever it is. It doesn't matter to me. And I've heard ridiculous things. Some people are superstitious and the thing they believe in is some totemic thing they found or something given to them, or it's a ritual, or it's some cartoon or something they watch incessantly when they're feeling bad. Like whatever it is that I believe. I'm not particularly religious, but I am sort of spiritual about the idea of being able to kind of tap into things that we can't really perceive. I always think of my kids when my kids are like, babies, and you look at them and how little they understand about the world, where you're like, you are so dumb. Like I cannot explain to a 2-year-old, what the internet is or what all this stuff is happening around you, that you're in America, nothing. And so I'm always like, that's the human brain though. You know what I mean? Like that is the human brain. It's just at 2, who's to say that the human brain at 40, whatever, or, like all that isn't just as dumb given what's happening around us in the universe, and around us in the atmosphere. And so I like to believe that every once in a while you're able to kind of have that strange intelligence of being able to, or gut feeling of being able to tap into things that you can't understand, and that you're capable of understanding. And it gives me a lot of peace to feel like, well, anything that you can kind of define when it comes to the afterlife, when it comes to heaven and hell or God or the devil or any of that stuff, has to be too reductive or simple for whatever it is. And instead we're kind of like a 2-year-old trying to understand the internet. And so those things that give you that feeling that you're connected to something larger, whatever that is, I love those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't care
Oh,
what
yeah.
somebody comes to me with in the class and is like, this thing, I like, this is my thing. This is my great, go with it. Whatever makes you feel connected to something, you know, spiritual in that way. I don't care if it's, you know, like a stuffed animal or whatever. Great, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's finding wonder. That's it, you know. And for me, that was where Elvis fit in a sense of, you know, the magic of being like, there's no reason for this person to believe that they're going to become who they already feel like they are, and I
Mm-hmm.
want that. And that gave me that feeling. That was like, you know, I look back now, I mean, you know, I'm older and more of an elder statesman, but like when I look back at those early years in comics, like I really feel it. I mean, I was very just, you know, same. I believed in that energy. I believed in like, I don't care if they fire me. I have to get, you know, that and that, you know, what
Mm-hmm.
gives you that, do that. Like believe
Right.
in the thing.
Yeah.
Tattoo it on your body. Just go for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I it's interesting you say that because I grew up Catholic and I actually have a degree in Catholic studies. I'm not practicing Catholic anymore, but when I was growing up, I never really lived in I lived in somewhat of a strict faith household and family, but we're also pretty open to, you know, being respectful of other people's faiths as well too. And growing up, I always saw, you know, religious expression was just the human person trying to express the unexplained in ways that they can understand. And that's why I've always said that, you know, I'm a fan of religion in the sense that if it makes you a better person, then, you know, all for you. You know, it's one of
Yeah.
those things where I don't believe personally that there's like one, you know, right religion. I think all of them are valid to one certain extent because if you believe in some sort of higher power, it's like, you know, how are we even able to understand like all those things? And so maybe, you know, each religion has a piece of the truth and not the whole truth of, you know, what's true about, you know, our presence in the universe and, you know, the divine and things like that. So I didn't want to get into like a whole, you know, religious and
No, I
theological
love it. I
discussion,
love it.
but
It's like a
that's
lot
really
of the stuff
interesting.
that we
Yeah.
did, like metal, death, like a lot of that stuff is, you know, it's about it. It's about accepting the fact that, you know, if you feel like you can, like, you know, you can define it in a way where you're creating rules for everybody, then
Mm-hmm.
it feels, you know, false. If whatever it is for you, whether it's a defined or a structured religion, or it's, you know, going out in nature, or it's like again, it's a rock star that you love, like whatever makes you feel connected to something bigger than yourself and small, you know,
Mm-hmm.
small and big at the same time. To me, that's sort of the Zen, like
Yeah.
the nirvana is like, you feel tiny because you're like it's like a lot of it for me, the similar feeling is like, you know, I feel like there's so many things in this country that it's such a young country, right? So where I live,
Mm-hmm.
we're out in the woods, but everything around us, like you go into town, it's all very young. It's all, you know, strip malls and that kind of stuff. And it makes you feel very self-important because all your problems are reflected in the idea that everything is built your generation or one generation ago. So
Right.
it reinforces this idea that everything you're thinking about, everything you're living, everything you're experiencing is all there is.
Mm-hmm.
Going to places overseas or going out, you know, and seeing in America, particularly like the natural landscape, which we have these majestic, you know, ancient mountains and red rock, all that, whatever makes you get out of yourself and be like, you know what, my problems in my life are small. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's this, I'm connected to something far bigger than myself. And therefore, I am big and I am important, like that kind of strange, recursive or reflective, you know, sort of belief system where you go, you know what, by becoming very small in the face of things, I can feel
Mm-hmm.
important and confident, as opposed to, I always feel like everything I'm thinking and believing and all of that is important, and that, you know,
Right.
and whatever gives you that feeling of humility and absolute sort of smallness, and then confidence from that, and
Mm-hmm.
peace, like that, whatever that is, great. You know, whether that, for me, like, again, that can be being religious. I love that and believe in that. And I have, plenty of friends and family members who are, religious within whatever sect. Or just finding your own way through that, but
Yeah.
it's, to me, that's where the Elvis stuff fits in, is it's part of a larger belief system at this point as I'm older, which
Mm-hmm.
is that, when I was younger, it was just Elvis is awesome. I want to be like Elvis, and that's it, Now that I'm older, it's kind of connected to a larger thing, which is more like whatever makes you feel at once like, you know, tiny and insignificant, and at the same time, like, you can do whatever, free from that, and that you should be as confident as you can be to try the things in your life that will make you happy. Go for it. And that, so as long as it's not hurting anybody
Yeah.
or restricting anybody or whatever it is, I'm for it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's only once people start feeling like they have to tell other people how to live their lives that I feel like it starts to get, to me, like things that I shy away from.
Right. Yeah. Man, well, these are really deep thoughts for an interview that we haven't really started yet. But this is
I
great.
know,
Yeah.
right?
I love
Sorry, I
this.
should have just been like, yes, I love Elvis. Like
No, no,
Elvis.
no. This is great. I asked a question I wanted to know. So it was just fascinating how we went into this rabbit hole here. So
I
no,
know we've
that's really
gotten like
cool.
naked and talked about God and all at once, right?
Exactly. Well, Scott, I want to share with you that you're actually the first person I think we've had on the show where we're doing kind of just a interview with the writer. Usually when we have people on the show, we're talking about maybe a comic book story that they're putting out or something along those lines. This is kind of just a general interview with you as, Scott Snyder, not necessarily tied to a specific project or anything. So to start out the interview, I want to do something that was quick and fun that we can learn a little bit more about who you are as Scott.
Sure.
So I have like a list of like 10 questions called this or that, where basically I give you like one thing or the other, and you just tell me like which one you would prefer or like. And
Sure.
it's not a deep dive or anything. We might talk about it a little bit for like maybe a few seconds or something like that. But it's just like you give your answer, and then we'll go on to the next question. So does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so this is this or that with Scott Snyder. First question: pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
No, no, no. I'm not. I mean, I love Hawaii, blue Hawaii, and I love Hawaii forever. But I'm not. I don't
Not a
like
fan.
pineapple in general, so I wouldn't put it on anything.
Gotcha. Next question: ninjas or pirates?
Oh, that's tough, man. I love them both. I love them both. There's no, like, I'm not trying to be diplomatic. I just, I mean, but like, I grew up in an era of ninjas, man. It was like Sho Kasugi and
Yeah.
Enter the Ninja, dude, and like Ninja 2, Ninja 3, like all of that stuff. Like, I mean,
American Ninja.
I had a like one of those wooden katanas. I was like this chubby kid, and I had my parents, like, it was so funny. I'm like, I can't believe you let me get this stuff. I would order like ninja stuff from a catalog because, again, we lived like in the Lower East Side, Manhattan, and there
Yeah.
was a store. Yeah, and so I had a Chinese star belt, like, that you could take it off.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
And I would like walk around this like chubby 10-year-old with like a Chinese star belt you could like twist and throw, and just being like, I'm sure I would have like stabbed myself in the eye, but so I have to go ninja, I guess, and because
Yeah.
I grew up in an era where ninjas were, the
No.
era, and even that, like the first book, the ninja, like that,
Yeah.
ninjas were the thing.
No, same here. When I was growing up, it was the same exact thing. There's, all the things you listed. The Ninja Turtles was a huge popular thing when I was a kid.
American
And
Ninja.
yeah, and when I was growing up, we would go to this place in Tennessee, and they have all these like little souvenir, like unique local mom and pop shops, and one of them like sold all these kinds of ninja weaponry. which of all places, I wouldn't expect that to be in Tennessee. But just like you said, they had katanas, they had the throwing knives, the throwing stars, all that stuff. So I'm with you. I would have said the same thing, ninjas. Next question: shower or bath?
Shower. I will always shower. I've never been into baths.
Yeah, same here, but that's because I'm like a really big guy and like I just don't fit into baths. Like I'm 6'6", so my feet always only hanging over the bathtub.
Dude,
yeah.
That's big.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Soda or milkshakes?
Oh, I'm soda. I'm drinking soda. I have like soda right now. I'm soda.
Hangman or rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors, I'd say. It's like to find more moments in my life than Hangman, I would say.
There you go. Sandwich with crusts or without crusts?
I've never had, I don't remember ever having without crust. So I wasn't like a kid that my mom cut that off. So I would just say with.
Never had a Uncrustable before?
No, it's before. It's like after my time, I think.
Oh, for real? Yeah. Would you rather walk on carpet or hardwood floors?
Oh, hardwood. Everything. We're all hardwood floors. This office is all hardwood.
Nice. Would you rather work for the news or be on the news?
Oof. I don't know. I mean, depends what news. You know what I mean? Like, if it's
and while you're on the news,
be in the news for comic news and that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I guess I'd rather be in it. I feel relatively good about not having completely embarrassed myself in my life. So I feel like it would hopefully be for something somewhat neutral or positive.
Yeah. Country or city?
I mean, that's tough, man. I grew up in the city and I'm like, I never thought I'd leave. And now I live in like, there's like deer and raccoon right out there. So
right.
Like I'm split. I mean, I love the country though now. I feel like again, like I can see the ocean out my studio and I'm like, it gives me a lot of peace. Like so when I was younger, city, now that I'm older, I feel like I'm more of a country guy.
There you go. All right, and then last question, bungee jumping or skydiving?
I have not done skydiving. I've done bungee jumping. I feel like I worked at Disney World when I was out of college, when I was like trying to shake my parents off my tail, where they were like, we're going to be supportive no matter what you do. And I was like, I want to be a comic book writer. And they're like, we're supportive of that. And I was like, how could you be? So I was I'm gonna work odd jobs around the country and try and make you not supportive. And so I was like a janitor at Disney World, and then I was a character, and I had a boss there who he had skydived, and then his chute had not opened until the last minute.
Oh my god!
No, he was okay.
Yeah,
but he had landed very hard, and he had he had like a sort of a limp, but he was fine. But
right.
all he talked about was never go skydiving, like ever. And so I just remember like just being like, I'll never go. I promise. He's like, promise me, kid. And so it ruined me for skydiving forever.
I'm sure.
Like he would just tell the story, and I remember I was like sitting there with my like Pluto head about to put it on, and he'd be like, one more time, promise me never skydiving. All right. Okay, never. So
did you say you were Pluto at Disney World?
I was Pluto, I was Buzz Lightyear, and I was Eeyore. And then that's because I'm like 5'8", 5'9", and then they essentially like that's the height range for those characters. Right. So I still remember like, so when I went down there, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a janitor. I was a janitor. I mean, it was the only place that like hired, it was pre 9/11 and they would hire you like that day. And so I was like, all right, here's my thing. They're like, great, go be a janitor. So it was custodial. So I was custodial for, 6 months or whatever it was. And I loved it. It was, amazing and hilarious and weird. And
I bet.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they had these auditions for characters, and I was like, I'm gonna try that, and then I did it, and they taught you a dance. You had to do this dance that was like one of the 7 dwarfs, where you're like, yeah, kick, and then like kick, and then like you did like a kind of barrel roll, and then a ta-da, and like you went to a gymnasium and like did this with like every other hopeful character person. I remember like they did not call me at first, and then like a week later they called me and they're like, we have a couple costumes that nobody wants, and if you want them, like you can do it. I was like, I don't care what they are, I'll do it. And Buzz Lightyear was the first one, and it was awesome because it was foam, and like nobody wanted it because it was really stiff, and most of the people characters, they want to move up and to be like face characters, and then to be, a lot of them are aspiring actors. And so they want to be expressive, and Buzz Lightyear is like a very stiff foam costume.
Yeah.
But in like the Florida heat, foam is awesome because it's light and you're a superhero. And also you don't sign autographs, you have a stamp because you're just like wham. And so it was the best job in the world where you're like, I would like go up to a little kid and be like, feel their muscle and be like, whoa, you're so strong. You know what I mean? Be like, to infinity and beyond. Let me have your book, stamp. And then like, I was, and it was when Toy Story 2 was coming out. And so like, I was very good at that job. I loved it. And so I got into grad school for writing while I was there. And I was really lucky. I got into Columbia and like, it was this big thing. I was, really excited. But my boss, the one I was telling you about, came to me and he was like, it was about a year in at this point, and I was making like minimum wage, but it doesn't matter because when you're a character there, you're like, you're on top of the world. I had a girlfriend. I was like, this is it. I love it. And the guy's like, well, I have some news. He was like, you've done a good job and there's an opportunity for you in Tokyo Disneyland. And I was like, what? And he was
wow.
And I swear to God, like, this is what he said. And I don't like, I'm probably gonna get whatever, but he was like, and they have different height requirements over there, and you could be Prince Charming over there. And I was like, I was like ready to call grad school and be like, sorry, no way. I was so into it. I was like, I can be Prince Charming. Like, are you kidding me? And my parents literally like sent my best friend down at the time to be like, we're having an intervent. You were going to school, you're not going to go.
So that's where your parents drew the line eventually.
They did. That was I finally like broke them, and they were not supportive of that. So that was the end of my Disney career. But I still have my card, and I have like very fond memories of it. And it was I think it informs a lot of my writing, honestly, because it was really fascinating in the way that it was this it's a very odd space between fantasy and reality where, because, when I was custodial in particular, I mean, I didn't make any more money when I was a character.
Right.
But it was fascinating because when you work there, you have discounts on like everything across, not just in Orlando, but all across the county. And a huge amount of discounts. They give you a book that's called Donald's Deals. At least they did 20 years ago.
Right.
And it would give you, your cost of living would drop like half, for housing, for everything. And so it felt like you were making money, even if you're making minimum wage, because the cost of everything was lower. And I grew up in New York City, right? And again, I had an experience that was relatively working class and then very wealthy, people around me in high school, and meeting people outside that sphere that, were living a completely different sort of reality, and seeing the way a company could, be benevolent in the way of like, hey, your cost of living drops, and then when you get fired, all of a sudden you don't have anything in your bank account because you were still making minimum wage. That all of it was very fascinating. And the hardship of being an employee who's asked to do, especially in custodial, like very hard things, like it's hot and you're pushing a cart with 12 garbage cans in it up a hill, and you have to do it before the parade. Because if you get stuck in that parade, you are stuck. Like you cannot move, and you have got to get all those garbage cans into this stuff, get it back, and put it in the evac, this giant thing that sucks the garbage away and whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't, and seeing that, and like that life is hard in that in that job, in that but your job is to make up a fantasy for people that are there, that everything is, magical and wonderful. And the desire that people have, and it's not nefarious, like the desire to make that real is real with people. It's not just like I want to do a good job. They want you to want to do a good job, and there are all these kind of training tactics that make you, kind of cringe when you think about them. But what it really is like people, you want to create an experience for kids especially, but for families, because you have a family, really, to have a space where they can just get away and pretend for a moment that everything is okay, everything's safe, and so the strange desire of being like down in the tunnels and being like, F this, I hate this, like this, I had to get 12 garbage cans, I'm sweating, I'm covered in it, blah blah blah. And then like getting up on stage, as they call it, and then suddenly the overwhelming desire to be like, hey kid, you having a good time? You dropped your ice cream? Here's a Pinocchio card to get a new one. Like that. It was fascinating. And I feel like it informs a lot of my writing, the oscillation between the absolute hope that comes with Superman and Wonder Woman, and sometimes Batman, but Batman and the definite, like the complete horror of, the Joker and the people that say life is this. And it was a very interesting kind of cognitive dissonance and polarization of like the bad and the good all existing together and fighting all the time. So it was a big part of, I think, what kind of created my sensibility as a writer.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. My family and I, we're huge Disney fans. Like we have annual passes going to Disney World and everything, and we didn't grow up. My wife and I didn't really grow up like being huge Disney people. Like, yeah, we were Disney fans of like the movies and things like that. I think my wife's family went to Disney World once a year, or they went a lot as kids. I think I only went 2 or 3 times when I was a kid. But when we had our son, long story short, we decided to get Disney annual passes because my son's adopted, and we tried to adopt another child, but that fell through because the agency went bankrupt. And it's a lot of money to put out to go through adoption agency. And we didn't get any of that back when they went bankrupt. And so we just said, instead of trying to adopt another child, because we tried matching before, it didn't work, and we would have to fork out a lot more money this time to do it again. We just said, let's just, celebrate the fact that we're going to be a 3-person family and take I think we got like some sort of tax break because of the failed adoption and all that. Let's take the money that we got from the tax refund for that and celebrate it by getting annual passes. And I tell you what, like watching my son go through Disney World for the first time, and it's just like what you said, I think it's easy because you see the magic come alive through them, and it's really contagious,
It is.
And he's still like that. Every time we go back, like he just still gets so excited about all of them. He still loves the characters, and you can't help yourself but just get excited with him. And there's just something about that. So I don't doubt you for one second that it's really inspired your writing with that, because I don't know probably same thing with you. I don't know how they do it or what the secret ingredient is, but it's like every time you go in there, it's somehow it's magical. It's not like they do anything with like real magic or anything like that, but it's somehow it's transformed,
Yeah, I think it's just that all of us, that you want a place where, everything, like everything is okay, and I think it's one of the things that was inspiring about it when I was there too, was that, it's always been a safe space for everything. And one of the things that was really interesting was that it attracts a lot of people that are discriminated against in conservative areas and that stuff too, for their whatever lifestyle, different lifestyles, from LGBTQ to people that feel like they have, for people that have disability, all kinds of stuff. And it's a place where I loved working there and feeling like it was a haven for people that wanted to feel accepted, and and so, yes, it's this big corporate monster, and it's all these things. But when you're there and you're living it too, and you see people that have not felt safe in their lives and their choices and their nature, whatever it is, like whatever has, whether it's their things that have to do with how they were born or things they've chosen, all kinds of stuff in their lives, whether it's, whatever it is that's made them feel like they don't have a safe place. Going there and seeing them either work there or come visit there, there's something very moving in that, and something inspirational in that regardless. And working there, it was definitely it was a family. I loved it. I love the people. I still, the people that I worked with, I'm still friendly and all that stuff with a bunch of them. And that, you're kind of in it together, and there's a feeling of like you're in this space that says everything's okay, so you kind of make it okay no matter what.
I love that. Yeah, well, and you hear people say it all the time too, but cast members is what really helps create that environment as well too. And so it's, man, I tell you what, like this is this has been a great conversation.
I'm like, comics, I know.
Yeah, I think at some point we should. Hey, but here's the other thing, Sky. Like I've been a very strong advocate of. I know social media has really directed people into identifying like a niche, like what's their thing in a sense, right? But I think anyone can also say that we're much more than just our thing or our niche. And that's one of the things I like about this interview so far, and the things I want to do more is talk to you more about like things that's not about comics, and get to know Scott, just because let's be honest, like this is not your first comics interview. You probably answer like a lot of questions about comics all the time, but I think this has been a lot of fun talking to you about like religion, and I had no idea you were a Disney World cast member. Yeah.
No, I love it. I mean, again, like nothing off limit. I'm happy to talk anything in comic. Like I've spent a lot of years where I feel like when I was at DC. There was on my part, especially in the early years, there was like when I got on Batman. I mean, I've said this many times, but I'll say it again. My experience was like I always wanted to be in comics. I took a detour in prose because I thought I couldn't. I realized I couldn't draw well enough to be a comic writer artist, and I didn't know how to be a comic writer. And it was a really exciting time when I was in college in writing for young, like up and coming people, and George Saunders and Dennis Johnson. There are all these like really interesting sort of short story writers and novelists and people trying new things. And so I fell into that. But I realized pretty quickly doing it, and I was doing well with it, but I realized I didn't like it because it was so isolated, and I missed comics and I read comics. And so when the chance came to pitch for comics, when a couple editors read some of the stuff I was writing and came to one of the readings that one of the things I was doing, I really jumped at it, but my feeling when I got in was that I'd be working for 10 years, in very small indie or very small superhero before I ever got a chance to do anything close to a Batman comic or any of that. I never expected to be on Detective or Batman, and those things came really fast, like immediately, so quick that I genuinely felt for the first few years of my career constant anxiety, constant panic, constant like I am not worthy of being on these books, and I was not worthy of it, and just being like, all I'm going to do is try to prove to myself that I can write something that makes at least some sense of why, like I have something to say and I want to do it. And so my point, the thing I'm trying to get at is that those first 3, 4, 5 years, all I did with interviews was, what things I could say to convince people like that this comic, that this thing was sincere, which it was, and this is why you read it, and this is why I'm here, and what I love about DC, and I still feel that way. Like, I still think about superheroes. I talk to DC, I talk to everybody, to Marvel, but and I love them, and I'm going to go back and do superheroes at some point. But I'm happy to also do interviews now at this point where I can relax a little bit and enjoy. I like that period, as much as it was this kind of almost like near vertical ascent, where I was so lucky, I was so lucky and I'm so fortunate in that. But it's also a period that was really tough because it was always just being plucked from like single A baseball to pitch in the World Series where you're like, what? You know?
I'm
And
sure. Yeah.
so all I did was talk about the series and stay on message about why this is this. So
Right.
it's very fun for me at this point in my career to be able to both creatively explore with all the stuff I'm working on, with
Mm-hmm.
Best Jacket, between the books that we did at Comixology, between the books we're doing at Dark Horse and IDW, to this kind of stuff, to being able to talk a little bit more and be a little more relaxed. I'm
Yeah.
happy with who I am in comics at this point. I feel very grateful and very lucky, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel the same level of pressure and anxiety. I feel like if I go back to superheroes, or when, not if, but like I can go back without worrying the way I did before. And, I've gotten to do all this indie stuff the last couple of years, especially, that's really pushed me in directions that have let me be exploratory, where whether Barnstormers, which is historical fiction. It's about a guy
Yeah.
a guy in the early 19 teens who's an escaped mental patient who pretends to be a pilot because he kind of got a plane haphazardly from somebody else in the mental hospital, and starts flying around the country, and meets somebody who's like a runaway bride. It's like the craziest story I've tried. So it's no monsters, no superheroes. It's just stuff that's, sci-fi with Francis Manipal on Clear, or horror with Greg Capullo on We Have Demons, to,
Mm-hmm.
Westerns with Dan Panosian with Canary, to be
Right.
able to just kind of flex muscles I always wanted to try. And people have showed up and it's meant the world to me. So I just feel like I can, yeah, I love talking about everything and not being self-conscious or anxious or, worried. Just being able to be like, let's, anything you want, like, and to talk about, I'm excited to talk about, because it's, I don't have to be that, you know, I promise you, like, I care about Batman. Like,
Oh, I know.
that,
Yeah.
like, and I did, like, I have like 20 stories in my head for Batman until the day I
Oh, I'm
die.
sure. Yeah.
But I mean, that was all the whole totality of like my sort of my whole project when it came to any interview was like, I swear to you, whoever is interviewing me, like, this is the best I can do. It might not be your favorite, but I'm trying my best and I love these characters and this is why you should read it, and that's it. And it was
Yeah.
just that,
Yeah.
and when by the time we got to metal, I could be a lot more like, you know what? Let's have fun. Like, this is what this is about. And
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
so yeah, so it's kind of come, I feel like I'm in the best stage of my career so far, where I feel energized and excited. I'm trying all kinds of stuff. I can be out of the spotlight a little bit, a little more low key, just trying things that I want without the same pressures of being on a major series that needs to hold everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm kind of like slowly feeling my way back into that, being like, maybe in a year or so, maybe I will go back. Maybe I will try something that's,
Yeah.
surprise, go back in there and get back in that ring and be like, maybe I still have it. Maybe I can still do it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to share with you, since you brought this up, with your work on Batman: The Court of Owls. I want to share with you my personal story with that series there.
Sure.
Um, Growing up, I'll be honest, I can't remember if I read a lot of Batman comics when I was a kid. I remember there's probably a couple that my uncle had, because he was the one that introduced me to comics. And I remember there was, Bane Nightfall, or Batman Nightfall with Bane on the
Yeah.
cover. I remember that capturing my attention, but I never read it. And, just like most people, when I got to high school, I got away from reading comics, and then I got back into reading comics because of Marvel Unlimited back in 2016. And then that's when I decided that I wanted to, start buying comics again and start reading them. Court of Owls was the first Batman comic I bought. And I think it's the first one that I read. And I can't remember why I picked that one. I don't know if like someone suggested it to me or what, but I got to tell you, Scott, I was absolutely floored by that
Oh,
story.
thank
It
you.
it, it was probably the best comic I could have picked to get back into reading, for not just Batman but just for like any comics. Like I've read comics, before that, but that was the one where I was just so amazed by the story with it because I loved how some of the little tidbits, like using the contact lenses with the back computer to introduce the characters. I thought that was a phenomenal way of doing that. That made a lot of sense. I love the not it's a maze or
Labyrinth, yeah, the
labyrinth. Thank you.
labyrinth.
Yes, yeah, the labyrinth where you have to like physically turn the book to read
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I remember thinking like I've never had this sort of experience with a comic book before. And so it's been one of my favorites. And when you went to Memphis Comic Expo, I took that book and had you and Greg and Jonathan signed it because that was and you guys are my first comic creators signatures. I never
Oh,
got anything signed. You three and Mark Wade was there at Memphis Comic Expo as well too. I had him
yeah,
sign Daredevil #7 because that's the one with the Daredevil cover with him and the making the snow angels.
yeah. I remember.
Um, but yeah, I mean that was because I just absolutely loved that book. I thought it was great story writing. I thought it
Thank
was great art. It's what I loved about it is that it was a new set of characters for the villain that I've never read before. You ask anybody who's never read comics, they know who the Joker is, they know who the Riddler is, they know Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, all of them. But the Court of Owls being kind of like this new villain team that we haven't seen before. It was phenomenal story. It's one of my favorites. It's definitely one of the ones that I recommend to people if they're asking about any comic to get into. That one is one of them on the top of my list was because of how well the story is and how it gives people a story that they haven't read about in relation to where they've seen or heard about Batman in like popular media, things like that. So
I
it's been one
appreciate
of my favorite books, and it has a special place for me
Thank
because of
you.
that.
It's funny because it really was like I had just come off of feeling like I had done detective for the year with Jock and Francesco, and I was just comfortable, even though I was like still terrified. I was like, well, it's Dick Grayson, and these are artists that I knew like at this point as friends, and
Hmm.
I felt good, and I was like, I can do another year of Dick Grayson. I have another story, and then they were like, well, we'd like you to move over to Batman. Tony Daniel is, going to swap and he wants to do detective and you can do this. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
I'm still going to be Dick Grayson, still work with Jock this. And they're like, well, you can't, we have a new artist for you. And it's this guy, Greg Capullo. I'm like, oh, Greg from Spawn. And that's amazing. But okay, it's very different, all right, well, whatever.
Hmm.
Like, it's not going to be Dick Grayson. It's going to be Bruce Wayne. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that, And then they were like, okay, well, just think of a story. And I had started to think of Court of Owls initially was something that I had thought about with Dick Grayson, but it had never gelled. So I'd kind of abandoned it where I had thought about, well, what if there was some group that like had targeted him when he was in the circus and it was part of Gotham and
Hmm.
because he was Batman now, but it was too redundant from the stuff I had done in Black Mirror and it felt weird. And then all of a sudden, when Bruce came along, I was like, well, what am I so what am I so intimidated by with this? And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, what how could what am I afraid of that I want Batman? Because that's always my approach, right? I'm like, what am I worried about right now that I want this hero to make me brave in the face of, So that's how I've approached every superhero comic I write, which is what if you look at like any of them, like whether it's Last Night on Earth or Metal or whatever, it's usually what's something in the zeitgeist at that moment that or something I'd
Hmm.
be afraid of for my kids or myself translated into like comic book lunacy. So, for example, Death of the Family is like we were about to have or our second kid, Emmett, at that time, and I was just terrified of like my career was taking off. I was, never expected to make any money, never expected to be the one that was responsible for things, never
Hmm.
expected to have the popularity that I had suddenly found myself having, felt completely overwhelmed by it, and was like, the only way I can manage this is if I'm a bad dad and I'm only about this. And that's why I was like, well, I'm gonna write a story where Joker is the character that would hear that fear and say to Batman, you don't really want this family you have. Like, you don't really want kids. You don't, behind this face is just more Joker. Behind your face is Bat. But if you choose them, you're going to be weaker and old and mortal. You choose me, you'll be immortal, you know, which is writing and that. So that whole thing, it's always that. It's always, how do I pick the thing I'm afraid of at this moment and then create a story around a hero to make me brave for that thing? And so Court of Owls, it was like, all of a sudden they were like, we didn't want to tell you this, but it's going to be Batman #1. And I was like, I quit. I can't do that. That's like too much, you know? And it was like, no, you have to do it, whatever.
Yeah.
I remember walking around the city where I used to live and where I had grown up, and the whole neighborhood was different. And I just had this thing. I'm like, what do I want to, I happened to be there because DC, the offices back then were in New York, and I had kind of wandered downtown to where I used to live. It was only, you know, less than a mile away. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, it's the whole legacy and it's the whole history and it's all of it. Like, I don't know how to write this book. Like, I don't know how to, I was just confident. I was just feeling good. And then all of a sudden, it's like the whole history attacked me of Batman. Like, how do you write Bruce Wayne and it's Batman #1? Well, you know, then you're like, well, how do I write that? Well, Bruce is feeling super confident and feeling good about himself, and the city is what he knows, and then all of a sudden the history is weaponized against him. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's a secret society that literally is the embodiment of the history of Gotham, saying to him, the only way to write the story and to be a good writer for Batman is to accept that you will never be able to touch the hem of the kind of history of Gotham and its amazing stories and all of it. And once you accept that and let it go and say, I'll never understand, you know, Gotham if you're Batman, and if you're the writer, to say, I'll never really touch the hem of these things. I'm just going to respect them.
Right.
And be humble before them. That's the point of that story, is Batman, Bruce realizing I'm a better Batman for understanding I don't know Gotham as well as I thought. I don't have control over it. I don't have, you know. So that's where that came from, was, again, like, just being like, where am I in my life at this moment? You know, and everything's like that. All the stories that are like that, you know, all of them are, you can kind of read my armchair psychology stuff.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing I want to ask you about the Court of Owls as well too, and this is in connection to the Matt Reeves the Batman film. So when they announced that there's a sequel coming out, there was a lot of discussion about who would be the next villain, because this is a very, you know, more grounded, you know, less campy kind of feel to the movie. And one of the top contenders, you know, fan favorites for Batman, the sequel to the Batman movie, was to have the Court of Owls as the villain for that. I'm kind of curious if you saw that online and like what you thought about that, if that made you excited, if you had different feelings
Greg
about it.
I mean, I text with Greg like every day. Like, I can show Greg. I was texting with him today. I was like, I miss you, bro. And he was like, me too. I was like, you know, I'll see you. He's like, I can't. He's not going to San Diego. And I was like, what? You know, but I know. But anyway, and we text like stupid memes and stuff back and forth. But Greg and I were all over that when that was coming out. I was like, did you see this? Like, because, I mean, you know, you, again, like, the hope was just to, like, survive, you know, writing Batman.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you, the biggest regret I have in, like, all of comics, honestly, like, out of everything, is that I don't feel that I got to enjoy those early years the way I wish I had, because I was just so insecure and so convinced that, like, you know, I wasn't wrong to be like, I don't deserve this, and I don't, you know, I was right. Like, I kind of walked in and they gave it to me. But I mean, my whole determination was like, I am going to die on this book. Like, I will give everything for and I did. And I promised, like, I still try and do that. I just have a better life balance with it. You know, at this point, at that point, and it was also DC was different then, and there was a lot of different tensions that aren't there anymore. But everything changes over time. There's different owners. Like back then, it was in the city, and it was going to move, and then it moved, and then there was AT&T oversight, and then it got bought by Discovery, and there's different oversight. So there's always different politics at play.
Right.
Back then, there was just a lot of, I was. It was also like I didn't know how to be diplomatic because there was part of me that wanted to get fired, I think. And so there was kind of like, if anyone argued, like if we had agreed on something and there was any argument about it, I was like ready to go to the mat over everything all the time.
Right.
And so it was always like, you know, just a lot of stress of like, they're not going to let it be called the court. Well, I'm going to drive in there and go into the office. And, there was a lot of that. And so at this point, I still feel like I give like the same amount. Like I'm very proud of the fact, and I know it sounds corny and, maybe it'll make people not like me, but I mean it sincerely. I swear on my kids, like I have never let an issue on anything out the door that I have not tried. I felt like I tried my best on, like even stuff that you would think of as low stakes, right? So like I'm doing a book with Raphael right now called Duck and Cover. Really love it. It's like about a bunch of kids in the 1950s that hide under their desks during a nuclear attack and strangely survive. And then all of a sudden find themselves in this post-apocalyptic environment where the Russians have invaded and they have robots, and it's really fun. But Rafa, like American Vampire is 10 years. You win the Eisner, like it doesn't, you could put out the book and just have fun. But I swear to you, both the people I gravitate towards, like him and Greg and Jock and Francis and, Francesco and Jamal and Tula, like it's the same mentality, which is you feel very lucky to be in this business and you're never going to let something out the door that you don't think is the best thing that you've made, or at least the attempt to make it that. And so this issue, my editor, Will Dennis, was like, this is the longest you've ever spent on a lettering issue. And I was like, I know. Like, he's like, it's been a whole week. You're just going over it. And I'm like, he's like, it's really fine. Like, you can let it go. I feel like I trying something different with it. I want it to feel like this very Stephen King nostalgia. Like I want it to be the point I'm trying to make is I can do the same amount of dedication that I did back then without the stress. Back then it was like,
right.
I can't let it out the door unless it's the best. And I have to, I have to worry and stress about it all the time I'm not doing it. And it'll mess up my family life and my relationships with my editors and all of it. And now I can still give the same and be like, I'm not letting it out the door until I feel sorry. Well, it's going to be late a week, but I can do it without being like a mess,
Right.
It's the only difference. Back then it was a mess, I was like a mess.
Well, and it sounded like you had a little bit of like imposter syndrome going on as well too when you were talking about like how you didn't deserve the job to begin with and everything. But it's like you have a lot of stuff that was happening then, and I can imagine the pressures being on it, like just like how you describe it is being kind of new to it and going in like with the heavy hitters, just like how you described going from a farming league to pitching in the World Series and stuff like that. That's a lot of pressure to kind of prove yourself in that.
I mean, it was crazy. It was like, because back then Batman hadn't had a number one in 70 years, and they were like, "You're the number one." And I was like, "You have to be kidding me." And then meanwhile, Grant Morrison was on Batman Inc. And like, you're around these giants. Everywhere was a giant on the New 52. It's like Azzarello over here and George Perez doing, Superman. And I'm like, I'm on Batman. This makes no sense. It was, like, you know what I mean? Everywhere was someone that I had like grown up looking up to. Gail and everyone was everywhere. Jeff Johns, obviously. Everybody was like, I'm like, how am I doing this? So, there's that. And then there's imposter syndrome. And one of the nice things was, though, all those like all the people that you'd be intimidated by, for the most part, there are a couple people that are whatever, but most of the comic creators that you'd think, are these big legends and all that, they're very kind and they were very nice to me. And I remember early in those years, Grant was always very nice. Grant always pulled me aside to be like, "How are you doing?" and tell me your story.
Nice.
And I remember telling him the Black Mirror before I did it. Like, I was nobody, and he took the time in San Diego when they had brought me there for American Vampire, to tell him what I was doing in Black Mirror, and he told me all about what he was doing in Batman Inc. And he was so kind, and he did that every time I saw him. He was always the nicest guy. And the same thing with Azzarello. The same thing. He walked me through a lot of stuff. The same thing with George Perez. Like, they're just super nice, But I remember Neil Gaiman, sitting with him one of those very early years at a dinner that Vertigo had set up we were in San Francisco for this crazy thing. It was a really weird weekend. It was like me, Becky Cloonan, and Gerard Way, and all these people like doing Vertigo stuff, and Neil Gaiman, and it was amazing. It was like one of the best weekends of my career. And I remember sitting with him, and he's like, "You look really nervous." And I was like, "I'm so nervous. I'm a Batman. I don't know what I'm doing." I'm like, he's like, "Scott, right now you're worried you're not good enough. And in a few years, you're just going to be worried you used to be better. And that's all there ever is." And I was like, wow. And it made me feel so like calm and comforted, honestly, to hear this horrible thing, because I was like, if that's the way you feel, then like, this is totally normal to always have imposter syndrome. Until then you have the worries like, oh, I used to be better than I am now, and that's it. And
right. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I feel very very grateful to the people that back then, a lot of the pros were very nice. I feel like it set an example that is hard to live up to. But right now, I feel like a lot of the teaching and the stuff that I'm trying to do through Substack is, trying to pay that forward a little bit, at least.
Yeah.
Like, comics is awesome and welcoming, and it's super stressful. And we had the whole comics broke me. Like, there's a ton of stuff that's wrong with comics, and it is like, I mean, there's companies that are predatory, companies that don't pay, like, and there's heartbreak everywhere.
Yeah.
There always was. I mean, there was when I was coming up too, believe me. Like, it was not an easy environment, but at the end of the day, it's such a great community of creators and big new, like, and it's such a kind of be yourself, write the things you want. It's hard to find those kinds of spaces that are as inclusive and as encouraging as comics is. For all the bad players, there's so many more good players that it makes me really happy to be a part of it. It really does. It's hokey. All of it sounds hokey, like a Hallmark card, but I mean it. It's like sincere.
Yeah. No, and I honestly, I believe you. Like I said, I mean you in person a couple of times. You're a very genuine person, so I definitely believe you. And what's funny is I know we're like around. We've been talking for an hour. We've hardly touched about comics. Again,
you can ask me anything you want about. Yeah, we could talk. I should promote some stuff. I feel like in some way.
Oh no. Honestly, we've had some great conversations, and I think, and like I said, one of the things I've been wanting to do is, get to know Scott kind of like outside of comics. We had a good portion of talking about comics and everything, but I also had like a whole list of questions I was going to ask you. We didn't even get to that because we've been having some great conversations about almost everything under the sun. So what I want to do, if this is okay with you, is I want to, be cognizant of your time and listeners' time, stuff like that, is kind of go to the final segment of the show, which is usually we talk about the comics that we're reading.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So before we get into that, just want to remind everybody that the Caption Life is part of Comic Watch, and we're always looking for reviewers for comics, TV, movies, anime, gaming. So if you're interested in being a reviewer, we're a group of volunteers that absolutely love doing this. So if you're interested, I will have a link to application in the show notes below, and we get back to people within, I think, 7 days when they apply. And then next week is going to be a review of Flashpoint with Chad Burdett, who is a content manager over at Comic Watch as well, too. So that's what you can expect for next week. and let's dive into the comics we're reading. First thing we're going to do is we're going to share what the listeners are reading, and then Scott, I'll ask you what you're reading, and then I'll share what I'm reading as well. So,
yeah, sure.
Awesome. So with at Comic Watch, Tyler Davis said that he is reading Peter David's first go at Spider-Man 2099, and I've been reading some random issues of Marvel Team Up and Marvel 2-in-1 I found in my LCS dollar bin. I'm on a real Marvel kick right now, but my favorite weekly pull right now has to be Black Cloak, which I'm finally caught up on. And yeah. And I just learned about Marvel 2-in-1 like just recently as well too. So I'm always I love doing this show for a number of reasons, but one of them is I'm learning from other people from doing this, and so it's a lot of fun kind of hearing this from people. Anthony Bergamini from Comic Watch said, I've been reading all of Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and almost done with the G. Willow Wilson stuff. I'm trying to get through all of Champions as well too, and I gotta say I love G. Willow Wilson's Miss Marvel. That was the one I read on Marvel Unlimited, and I couldn't put it down. Like I kept reading the next issue after next issue. It was really, really good.
Yeah, G. Willow has had so many. I feel like one of the most underrated series is Air that she did back when that was when I was starting at Vertigo, and so with Air. And it's if you haven't read that, like she's done a ton of stuff. It's like Miss Marvel is amazing, and everyone should read it. But I think let it be a rabbit hole for you to discover all of her other stuff too, because she's done it.
Oh yeah, she does some great stuff. Yeah, well, and case in point, she's writing Poison Ivy, and that was supposed to be a limited series, and they made that into ongoing because it's been so popular, and it's really well written. Yeah, I absolutely love her work. In our Illumicasters Discord channel, Year of the Collector said for next week he's pulling Scarlet Witch Annual #1. Absolutely love what Orlando and Pichelli have been doing with Wanda. For DC, I got to go with Wonder Woman #800. It's the final issue, and we get to meet Diana's daughter Trinity.
Yeah.
That's been hitting social media for the last few weeks as well too. So that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, I can say I've read Tom's Wonder Woman for September, and it's amazing. I was like, he sent it to me and I read it. I was like, Tom, this is one of the best things I've read, and I mean, it's gonna blow people away. It's so good.
I bet. And then Ken from the ODPH podcast said, Click, Click, Boom, #1 by Image Comics, a very cool revenge mystery story, and rereading Canary by Snyder and Panelian Comixology Originals and prep for the epic horror Western finale coming soon. So
very proud of the finale. It's like very unconventional. So it's kind of like True Detective in the Old West. It's like very cosmic horror in a Western, but it's why it's like if I had to write a Western, why is it so hard to write them right now with the way things are? And it's kind of like it felt like it had to be horror too, and it just fit, and all of a sudden it all clicked where it was like, this is why. So I love it. It's one of my favorite series that I've done. So
awesome. Well, we're looking forward to reading that. That's awesome. So Scott, what comics are you currently reading right now, or if you have a pull list or anything like that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I like superhero stuff that I'm reading that I'm really enjoying. I mean, Superman, I think, is like a real renaissance book right now. I knew what Josh had planned on that book with Jamal for a while, and then reading it in action is just so good. I mean, his plans are amazing. I really like, I mean, I love Chip's Batman, and obviously Jorge is like, a brother in arms. I love Jorge. So them, also superhero wise, I feel like, they're, what are some of the other things? Like, I don't know. I mean, I've been reading a lot of indie stuff, honestly. Like
what?
I'm coming off of a period, to be frank, where I couldn't read anything while I was in that Witches writer's room. So I was in this Witches. I'm show running with a co-show. I'm show running with another amazing a writer I love. This woman, Marianne Dare, who's fantastic. She wrote a bunch of Better Call Saul and Curb Your Enthusiasm, and she show ran Echo for Marvel, which is coming out later this year. But we're doing the Room for Witches, and it's Amazon, and it's the same. They did Invincible, and so it's like that sort of super R-rated jocks art animated. I'm really excited about it. I just so love this thing. But the work was out of control where I knew it was going to be a lot, but it is a lot. Like you were there from 9 a.m. LA time, so 12 until 6 p.m. like this time, and then doing notes afterwards, doing notes before, prepping 5 days a week, that for 5 months, you know what I mean? Which again, it's like a normal job. But the issue is like when I started it, I didn't realize it was going to be that much because I had done a mini room where it was kind of supposed to be similar, but where they got us the green light to be on TV. But while I was show running that, it was more casual and it was much more manageable. And I just didn't put it together where I was like, we were only making 4 episodes in that room, even though we had kind of the same amount of time, almost the same. We have more weeks here, but this is like making the whole season and planning the next season. And like, it's much more like intense with more writers, more everything. And it's real. It's like going to be on TV. So the whole thing made it so that like between March and, at the end of April from those couple, I totally didn't read anything. So I'm just like now. But the things that I did keep up with and read, I read a lot of indie stuff just because I felt like I didn't need to know continuity, because I couldn't keep up with
Right.
continuity. So the books that I really loved, I mean, I think I knew World Tree ahead of time because I've read James's stuff. He's like my best friend and obviously one of my best friends with Greg and Jock and Rafa, and Tony. But that book is out of control, amazing. Obviously, Something is Killing Children, Department of Truth. But other books I really liked, Local Man by Tony Fleeks and Tim Seeley. I feel like it's flying under the radar, but it's awesome. It's over at Image. The Forge, the Greg Rucka book, I really love. It's only a couple issues in, but I think it's really fantastic. And again, like one of those books that flies under the radar. Kelly Thompson, Black Cloak, like you were saying, I think that's like a super groundbreaking book. What else? I'm trying to think like what else you might not be reading that like caught me off thing. What do I have right here? I'm looking. Oh, it's all my student stuff. That's stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Those are just some things off the top of my head that I really liked. Jeff Lemire, Phantom Road. I think that's that
I've been hearing great things about that one too.
Yeah, the whole universe he's creating over there is pretty fantastic. And yeah, I don't know. That's those are the things. And I'll tell you, check out Edenwood by Tony in September. That book's going to be bonkers. I love it. It's like demon hunting and witches and all kinds of monster action by Tony Daniel. So
I've heard a lot of these and I've read a couple of them. I agree with you. I love indie books because as much as I love DC and Marvel, like X-Men is one of my favorite properties. At the same time, there's just so much going on that it's kind of hard to keep up with all those things. So one of the nice things about the indie stuff is that just like what you were mentioning before, it's all these self-contained stories that you don't necessarily need to read all these things or kind of know all this history of those things. So I absolutely love indies for those. And one of the books I just ran into that I read that I absolutely fell in love with is Battle Chasers, which I didn't hear about it until someone mentioned it. And didn't realize it was written like issues 1 through 9 was written like years ago. I think like the last one was back in 2001. And then it like kicked up, and it's a really good issue. And it's I haven't read 1 through 9 yet, but just reading that one was just a lot of fun and really exciting, really good. That I feel like I can go back and read 1 through 9 and not feel like it's going to be a burden to read all those things.
I just feel like they're such a rich landscape right now in the indie world where there's just like, just it feels as though it's like I don't know. I know people complain there's almost like too much. But for me, I just feel like it's, I don't know, like I came up at a time when I felt like, you either did Marvel or DC and indie stuff was kind of you did Image and that was it. Like it was relegated to like,
Mm-hmm.
there weren't a lot of spaces. And so now people be like, there's so many books, I don't know what to read. And
Right.
like, that's amazing thing. Like
Yeah. I mean,
it's
that you can
it's
say the same thing about
fantastic.
regular books.
It's like it's so great to be able to be in a space where it's like you have too many books to read and you can
Mm-hmm.
pick from a million different things that are, really strong and out there. And, some things are super indie where it's about like a breakup at a Brooklyn cafe, and some things are like out of control, bombastic, like
Mm-hmm.
Robert's Avoid Rivals. And that's another book that I'm excited. Yeah, I just read and spoke to him yesterday about like all the cool stuff they're doing over at Skybound between Transformers and G.I. Joe and
Yeah. Yeah. That's
other stuff they're
huge.
going to announce soon. Yeah, they're awesome. So
Yeah.
you can see something like that that's like the height of epic whatever, and that's still
Mm-hmm.
indie, and it's cool. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just it's this massive, robust landscape that wasn't there when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I know and that's what I like about a lot of the indies as well too is there's a lot more stories. There's like genres for everything basically. Whereas,
Yeah.
the longest time comics were, superheroes because it sold for the longest time. And now there's all these, genres, just like how you have with books or TVs and movies, that there's horror comics, there's gaming comics, there's, you name a genre, there's a comic version of that out there somewhere. And so there's definitely something for everyone when we talk about, going beyond, the major two, as people say, and going into the indies where you can, read a book and find something that you'll actually really enjoy because of the genre and the style of writing and the art and everything.
Yeah, and one more book that I forgot that I really want to mention is like everything that Kyle Higgins is doing with the Massiverse at Image.
Yes.
It's such an inspiring thing to me to see someone not only create like a flagship book for a universe, but then invite in so
Mm-hmm.
many cool creators. And the way that he structured his deal with them, where they really own a piece of each book, is a very forward-thinking, progressive, fair, honest, really cool way of building
Yeah.
out this whole sort of line of things. And I'm really in awe of what he's able to do with the universe creatively, but also his very daring and acrobatic kind of marketing stuff, where it's like this book has black light this, and this book has this.
Yes.
Pick which person is going to be the superhero. Call in, like, Jason Todd, whatever. Like all of it's, he's on fire with it. So that is definitely an area. That whole series of books to me is something that's super impressive, and I love
Yes.
it. I'd be remiss not to mention it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been really enjoying Radiant Black, and Who Is No One is a really
Yeah,
great
there
one.
was no one in
Yeah.
Rogue Sun. That one too is
Rogue
super.
Sun, Infernal Go Red.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Those are really good. Yeah, I agree. I've been reading those, and they're fantastic. Again, just another example like how there's so many great stories out there.
Kyle. I was talking to him today on the phone. Actually, it was funny, and he was like, uh, "How did it come up?" He was like, "I was complaining about my teenage son a little bit, like in a way where it's like he's a teenager and he's 16, and he's asleep at noon and whatever at summer." And he was like, "Oh yeah, yeah." He was like, wait a minute, Jack's 16." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, we did our first book together. He was like 3. And I was like, "What?" And I looked back, it was like he was 2, actually, and I was
Yeah.
crazy. I was like, so we were joking around today just about like Gates of Gotham and all the stuff we've been through. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's fun to have people at this point in your career too, where you're like, "God, you've really been through it. Like you knew me when I was 2 kids less, and you knew
Yeah.
me, I knew you when, you were like a baby." So it's nice. I mean, James was like, that's what's so funny is like, we've all been friends at this, like, through marriages and divorces sometimes, and children and pets, and, regime changes galore, like people, whole companies being fired and redone. And,
Right.
I knew James was my student when I was like 20 something year old adjunct teacher, and he was an undergraduate, and then we've been friends 15 years, and now he's like my favorite writer in the stands. And It's nice. It's nice to be able to, Sean, to like look around at this point in your career and be like, you're surrounded by people you admire and, you know, you're inspired by and who you know and respect and your friends and that stuff. And for the early years where it felt like things were out of control, where for me at least, like I was just a ball of anxiety, and there's nothing that I mean, the things I'm embarrassed of that I did at that age or that stage of my career, I don't stand by them, but like it was basically always like yelling at Dan DiDio or yelling at Bob Harris or freaking out in a way that was like, you know, ready being like trying to get fired by yelling at my bosses. So it's no like horrible, you know, it wasn't, I don't feel like I was, there's not a lot from that period at all that I feel like I was, you know, that I look back on and feel really super embarrassed by in some way. So don't get me wrong.
Right.
But even moving past that stage, you know, being able to look around now at this stage, being past all of that anxiety and stress and bad behavior, I feel like it's a nice moment, you know, in my career life. I feel like you can look around and be happy about, for all the problems in comics, for all the things that are, to really love the community and feel like it's something really special, you know, and that you love the people you're surrounded by. It's nice.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thanks for coming on the show again. Before I let you go, where can people find you and your work online? Where can they, you know, connect with you at?
Yeah, well, I have so I mean, I'm on social media, I'm on Twitter, and my DMs are always open, and I'm on Instagram and that stuff where I post more about my kids and that and all of those things. But and my handle is ssnyder1835, which is Elvis's birthday, is 1835. That's why that, if you ask. But I started teaching a class and started a newsletter on Substack. So it's called Best Jacket, which is my imprint, or you can look up Our Best Jacket or Best Jacket Press. And we've been doing the newsletter now for a couple of years. There's a lot of them. I do it twice a week or sometimes once, but usually twice. I record them in audio so you can listen to it or you can read it. And there's links, and I recommend comics, but I talk about, you know, what I've been reading and also craft stuff. And I teach a class through that too. So about once a month, we do a live class that then if you subscribe to the newsletter, you can get all the ones we've done in the past, all 20 something classes so far about character building or conflict. And I love it. It's a very fun thing for me, even though I don't have a lot of time, but I feel as though it's like I wouldn't give it up for anything. So you can find me over there, and we're about to launch our new site for it. Actually, I think it's just like in 2 weeks, we're launching a new version of the site that has like merch, and you can order all of our books and all that kind of stuff. So it's all through Third Eye Comics down in Baltimore. They're awesome. You should check them out. But they're the ones powering the site, and anything you order is from their store. So I'm really through their store. So I really love being partnered with them. They're great.
That's awesome. Well, great. Well, I'll make sure to put links to those in the show notes below as well, too. So, Scott, thanks again for coming on the show. This has been a blast. I love interviewing you and talking to you about comics and non-comics related stuff. But thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, anytime, Sean. It was a pleasure, man. This was a great interview. I love to, and I'll do it again anytime you want.
Awesome. Thank you. And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Caption Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.